I'm not Trout for anybody who didn't bother turning up to any of the other things I did. And I mostly hack on various Perl projects, Catalyst Web Framework, DBX class LRM. Moose I mostly leave to the people who are more experts at writing object systems than I am. And sort of sit there and occasionally break the volume by breaking the code. I work for a company called Shadowcat Systems. We're based out of northwest England, and we're an open source web development consultancy. We help people usually with Catalyst and DBX class projects and that sort of stuff. And I want to say thank you to both Shadowcat and Software Republic Interest, because between them they're responsible for flying me all the way out here and paying for a hotel room. So people keep saying, the Perl's dying! It must be dying! Netcraft confirms it, just like BSD. But one of the things is, Perl people don't tend to go for showing. Our toolkits don't tend to have an x-power-by header like PHP stuff and frameworks and Rails and whatever do. So the Netcraft Active Site Survey can't actually pick it up. It's just there on the back end doing its thing and nobody needs to care, because the Perl philosophy is be pragmatic. Do whatever you need to do, make the application work. This is what we're about. We're not about sort of, yay, shiny toys. We're about actually producing something that's usefully deployed in production. But the number of Perl jobs available is still climbing. So,
it's compiling Perl.
Sorry?
It's compiling a Perl interpreter.
Fuck you and your fucking belt sander. Excellent. Right, anyway. And the rate of CPAN releases is still climbing, so there's more and more people not only being paid to use Perl, but contributing open source code written in Perl. And Perl 5 powers a hell of a lot of sites. Powers Vox.com, 6 parts blogging site, LiveJournal, all of their other properties. Tackle.com, which is a fairly large high school sports social network in the US. Perl powers most of the BBC web infrastructure, including the new iPlayer site. And it even powers the Alexa ranked 34 porn site. So that's a fairly big deployment, you know. Now, the sort of old Perl 5 is dying thing started about sort of, I guess, 2001 to 2002. With the sort of the Great Depression of the Perl community, where we kind of stood around waiting, because, Perl 6 has been announced, so what was the point in extending more Perl 5 stuff, or we were all going to be migrating soon? And so we were sort of sitting around and going, well, it'll come soon, and then we can get back into doing stuff. And now, the release date for Perl 6 is Christmas, but we won't tell you which Christmas. So People have been waiting for that, and then sort of about 4 years ago, the Perl community as a whole went, well, fuck that then. And let's take the Perl 6 project as a fantastic language design research project that may or may not ever see production. And we're going to improve in Perl 5. And then there has been a series of sort of a new Perl 5 enlightenment almost of projects that have... See, earlier I had slides failing, I had projectors failing, now it's fucking zip on my combat's failing, never mind. All software sucks, all hardware sucks. All meatware also sucks, but anyway. So no, there's been very much a new Perl 5 enlightenment in that people have been sort of coming out of hiding and starting to push the state of the art forwards in terms of public code, and to be willing to stand up and say, I'm proud to be using Perl because it's a fucking awesome language. And look at all the cool shit that we've been building. And you've got a very mature community. I mean, Perl 5 is 14 years old now. Perl 5 version 10 was released on its 14th birthday. Which means that you've got very mature development practices. We discovered that things like monkey patching are a really bad idea, which if you browse around the web, the Ruby community is just starting to discover. Yeah. Which is fantastic. It's fantastic to watch, because if you look back 10 years ago, the Perl community was going through the same thing. And a lot of Perl people tend to play around with other languages. I mean, I PHP, and so on and so forth. And then there's also, because of this sort of momentum build, there's been a lot of new blood coming into the community, which has meant as well a lot of new ideas, and a lot of interesting ideas and good ones. And you can see the effect of this, because the CPAN uploads have always been steadily ticking upwards, so 100 a month in 2003 up to 200 a month in 2006. And then things really kicked in sort of about 2006. And if you look at 2007, 350 a month. This year, you've got 750 uploads to CPAN every month. That's huge. That's new modules or releases of old modules that are updating and adding new features. There's this huge community putting out a huge amount of very useful code. And CPAN is still possibly the single easiest way of installing extensions to a programming language that exists. It's a huge thing. And I'm one of the people who helps manage the CPAN upload system, and I approve new requests. And I get literally, I'm answering 10 requests for CPAN IDs a week. That's 10 new people saying, I've got something cool that I want to ship out there for people to use because I think it's useful. In fact, the biggest problem that companies using modern Perl are having isn't Perl. It's the fact that the perception that Perl 5 is dying has led to a bunch of people abandoning the language. And what they're having problems with is hiring people. So, I mean, if you're bored of your current programming language and you want a more interesting career and make some more money, learn Perl, because there are all sorts of companies out there crying out for people who want to do object-oriented, maintainable, production quality Perl. So, Perl 5 version 10, released earlier this year. It's got significant performance improvements. The regular expression engine now supports name parameters and a bunch of interesting search optimizations. I mean, the Perl 5 regular expression engine has always been kind of the gold standard. But with Perl 5 v10, we've gone back in a lot of the things that other regular expression engines had come up with that we were missing. And we're back leading the pack again by a long way. We also added we went, well, you know, Perl 6 actually finally produces switch statement syntax that we don't hate, so we stole it. So now Perl 5 has and it's a nice Perlish style. So you start off with a variable, you can apply a single value to it, you can apply a regular expression to it, you can match an array against an array, do membership matching, match objects against each other. And that's enabled by implicit use of the smart batch operator. So you're able to use that operator now in normal code as well. And we also introduced defined OR, which it might sound like a tiny thing, but it's so useful. The FreeBSD team actually backported it to their 5.8. Because if you think about it, you get a lot of situations where you want to say, I call this routine. If it gave me a value back, use that. If it didn't give me a value back at all, if I got undef or Python the equivalent is none, then use this something else. You want to test it for does it exist at all, not for truth. And so defined OR enables that. It makes a lot of code a lot more concise. And we also added say, which is basically for just throwing some data out to the console. So it's a print statement that implicitly adds a new line on the end, which again, it seems like such a tiny thing, but the number of times a day I write print something or other .\n, and with say, you just don't have to bother. And the other absolutely awesome thing is that V10 provides a see-through method resolution order, which basically we shamelessly stole from Python because they got multiple inheritance right and we didn't originally. And that enables you to do multiple inheritance and use multiple inheritance for overriding stuff in the same way. And that's incredibly powerful because if you're dealing with legacy code bases, you can't refactor certain stuff. It's really handy to be able to inject some extra logic into the tree just by slotting in an extra superclass. And it just works, it's beautiful. And there's the LRO compat package that means that under Perl 5v8 you can get the exact same syntax. It imposes a startup overhead because it has to pre-calculate some things, but you get full compatibility, so you can take advantage of these Perl 5v10 features and know that they're going to work on pretty much any Perl in production today. Also, the CPAN Plus client has gone into core. which is a much improved, rewritten means of installing and managing CPAN modules, with a very nice complement to the venerable cpan.pm. Provides a lot more advanced features, and also comes out of the box configured to be able to figure out what a mirror is. So you don't have to start off by doing a CPAN config before you install anything. You just start CPAN and it goes, okay, I'm ready. I want to install some stuff. And also module build's gone into core. It's not personally one of my favourite modules, but it does have some very useful functionality in that module build allows you to do building, testing and installation of Perl modules with just Perl on the system. You don't rely on make at all, which on smaller systems and when you're looking at packaging and stuff can be extremely handy, especially for people who don't really get makefile syntax. I mean, I am all for the fact that I might be younger than half the audience. I'm a grumpy old Unix bastard, so I actually really like make. But also, in the past couple of years, we've seen Vanilla Perl, which is a true basic Perl for Windows, built with no patches rather than the proprietary active state Perl. Vanilla Perl also comes with 2 extra flavors. Strawberry Perl, which comes with a good basic set of modules to save you having to install anything, and Chocolate Perl, which basically comes with arseloads of stuff, so 99% of the time you never have to install anything, which is really nice, because trying to compile stuff on Windows isn't amazingly fun. Although admittedly both of them do come with a working toolchain. In fact, we now have Perl on a stick, which is a USB key distribution of Perl 5v10, that literally you plug it into a Windows machine and it's just there and it goes, and it's already pre-configured to be able to build and install stuff. So you have zero installation, plug the USB key in and you've got a full Perl environment on your machine. So to talk a bit about some of the things that people have actually, that Perl actually enables. Perl 5 is very much a multi-paradigm programming language because of the sort of polyglot nature of programmers, and because a lot of us have a tendency to pore around interesting computer science stuff and go, that theory looks interesting, let's see how it works out in practice. So, for example, you can use Perl in a very functional way. You've got map sort and graphic core, and there are additional modules that provide reduce, zip, various types of filters. And so you can also, you can generate function references on the fly. So you've got a decent lambda feature, which sadly isn't present in Python because for some reason Dino hates lambdas. I think maybe somebody should make a program list for a week, but anyway. Also we've got things like, people looked at some of the Haskell stuff and went, auto-currying is kind of interesting. So why don't we make an auto-currying function declaration? So you say add into, you declare that, and then when you call it, it creates an auto-curried subroutine reference that you can then call with a value. So that enables sort of the sort of currying pattern style stuff from Haskell. Haskell's fantastic module called scale and defer, which gives you a lazy keyword that evaluates a value every time it's used, and a defer keyword that doesn't bother evaluating a value until you need it, but then caches it, so defer only runs it once. So you can set up all sorts of expensive operations, and only the ones that are actually used impose a runtime penalty. And then we've got some guys who learned airlines, so they built IPC messaging, which gives you airline-style message class-based concurrency in Perl. Anyone who's looked at airline will probably find that syntax reasonably familiar. And then there's continuity, which is a Perl 5 web framework that enables continuation-based programming, just like something like Seaside, and literally lets you do print out some HTML to the client, and then say request next, and that suspends the current continuation, and next request your code picks up exactly where it left off. So there's a lot of exciting things like this. If you're already using Perl 5 and you think, oh, it would be really nice if I could sort of get some of the features of that language to, because that would be a really elegant way of expressing my problem space. Well, the odds are that somebody's already built it. And if they haven't, Perl 5 is flexible enough that you probably can build it quite easily. And also, Perl 5 scales. It really does. It's actually a damn fast interpreter. I mean, people call Perl an interpreted language, they call Python an interpreted language. Now, Ruby is an interpreted language. Max Ruby interpreter actually traverses the AST, just in the same style as the old basic interpreters that people realised were a bad idea around, 1985. Python and Perl, on the other hand, both compile down to basically a custom virtual machine, compiled to opcodes. So you get pretty decent speed. I mean, Tim Bray's wide finder competition, where he was looking at rapid parallel processing of log files. A 40-line Perl script won that. It had better performance than any other submission. And it used the old traditional Unix style, fork a bunch of processes off, feed data through to their stood-in, pull the data back from stood-out, and then aggregate in the controlling process. 20-year-old technique. Used to be done in C, now hardware's fast enough, you can do it in Perl, and it's shit fast. And that sort of simple stuff lets you take advantage of multi-core very effectively, without learning any new techniques or fancy libraries or anything. Perl scales for large applications. People say, oh, Perl 5, you can't use it for large projects. Well, you can. I personally worked on a couple of Perl 5 projects with 20,000 lines. Now, okay, people will say, well, that's only a medium-sized project. Well, what I say is, there's only a certain size of the code base before screw whether the language screws you up. It's not going to fit in your head as a developer. So, I mean, what I say is, one large project should be any medium-sized project, and then everyone will find out who's connecting them. And, the Java guys have been screaming for years that Perl 5 is bad at large projects. What's this service-oriented architecture they've been talking about? Oh, look, same fucking thing. Thanks for catching up finally, guys. Perl scales for large teams as well. People go, oh no, Perl can only be dealt with by one programmer producing amazing line noise right over that nobody else can maintain. Now, bollocks to that. The sort of person who writes that sort of stuff is the sort of person you fire. Because modern Perl 5 is all about using the power and expressiveness of Perl to make code that demonstrates intent, which actually makes it, if anything, easier to read for the next person coming along than the equivalent code in another language. And then there's Perl Critic, which allows you to do analysis across your source code, so you can enforce coding conventions, say, we consider this a bad practice, so if anybody does this in source code, we've got a pre-commit hook on the repository that doesn't let them check it in. And then, so you can have a very good, very large uniform code base that a large development team can hack on concurrently quite comfortably. And then there's SPK, which is a subversion client written in Perl that provides offline working and decent merging support. So, unlike vanilla subversion with SPK, you can very effectively do branch-heavy projects where you've got 5 or 10 separate teams working on features and merging back to try and get things about. And then there's local lib, which is basically a 2-minute to install module that bootstraps itself and sets up an environment in your tilde/Perl 5 that all subsequent module installations go into. So each developer has one line in their bash RC that sets up some environment variables, and then they've got their own library tree, so they can upgrade their own versions of libraries independently of the rest of the team, so they can experiment with random shit, try new libraries that know they're not going to mess up anybody else, which means you can have 10 people on a shared development server and they never tread on each other's toes. And also, because Perl 5 requires you to import modules that you're running, it's considered a very good practice, and Perl Critic will shout at you if you don't. You can actually keep a good track of what parts of the code depend on what other parts, so that you know what needs to be fixed. And also, because there's lots and lots of tools built around the CPAN distribution style, and modern Perl 5 projects, the in-house code is built as a Perl distribution. You can take advantage of all of that tooling, all of the smoke testing stuff, dependency scanning, metadata. So splitting up a large project into half a dozen distributions developed independently is very possible, and your make-file.pl records your dependencies and will provide you with a make install depth target. So your approach for deploying to a machine can literally be untar this distribution, Perl make-file.pl, make install depth, make install, and it's all there and it just runs. And I've been talking about that. Perl scales very effectively to large deployments of dozens of machines, even hundreds of machines. Because you've got that sort of technique, and also C++ has plugins to generate Debian packages for you. So you can basically say, take my application and all of its dependencies and build me devs for it. And you just get a directory with a pile of devs in that you whack in your in-house Debian dev repository, point that at it, and your production servers can just be upgraded. And there's a CPAN spec, which is an equivalent tool, which does similar things for RPMs. And there's a CPAN Plus plugin for Mandriva, and there's stuff for FreeBSD, and so on and so forth. And another key thing, one thing that you get if you're scaling out to lots of machines, that's usually because you've got high volume. The key thing is being able to profile your application and eliminate bottlenecks. And Devil NYT is an amazing profiler. It came out of nowhere about a year ago, and some very, very smart people are now acting on it a lot. NYT Prof allows you to get line-by-line profiles of your application to show exactly which line is taking time, and it shows what's called it. So it can even say if you've got a particular routine that gets called 5,000 times from one place and it's shit fast, and it gets called 4 times from another place and that tweaks off a bug and makes it take 5 seconds, you can see it. You've got this pretty HTML profile output that shows you it. So it's now trivial to track down bottlenecks. It's easier these days to optimize a Perl program than any other language that I've worked with. Okay, people also go, Perl isn't really, it doesn't have a decent object system. Well, the reason for this is, the original Perl 5, Larry kind of wasn't sure how people would want to do OO. So what he did was he gave us a grab bag of tools to build object systems and let the Perl 5 community go at it. If you look at other languages that have not done that and run into problems. Python had their whole having to switch to new style classes and do a deprecation cycle and port code. And PHP has replaced its object model 3 times now and it's still shit. And Ruby doesn't really have an object model, even though they think they're object oriented, but that's a whole different run. But the thing is, now what we have is a project called Moose. Meta Object Orientation Syntax Extensions. Now, Moose is now the modern Perl 5 object system. It's what you use for all new development where possible. And you see, the Moose guys, they went, well, let's look at Perl 6, and let's look at Ruby. I should have Python on this list, but it didn't fit on the slide, I'm very sorry. I did mention stealing C3 from it, so obviously we are doing. And the common Lisp object systems, several different small talks in the NL family, especially OCaml, and even looked at some of Haskell's type class stuff, and nicked all the best bits. And the Perl 5 base, the MRO stuff, is flexible enough to let us do this. So now we've got a very rich attribute system. You can have rewrite and read-only attributes, separated getters and setters if you want, optional typing. You can say whether attributes are required or not, change the constructor arguments to something else. Moose also generates your constructor for you. Writing something new and doing a blast in it somewhere, like you have to do in vanilla Perl 5, is basically a low-level technique that you happen to use when you need to do a performance optimization or when you need to do something mental. And we've got method modifiers, which are hugely powerful. So you can wrap around the method, you can add something that runs before, and for simple subclassing, you can do an override. You can add the super keyword that Moose provides that just calls the superclass method with the original arguments for you. So it becomes very easy to tweak the behavior of a subclass without having to duplicate stuff. And also we have a role system. Roles are basically mixins plus interfaces on steroids. So, for example, we're providing a role that you can apply to a class for persistence, and it provides a method that saves it to disk and attaches it to the object's update. And then it says, well, your class needs to implement, calculate file name, and add string for this to work. So it can make the requirements, so it's part of mixin, part of interface, and that's compile time checked. So you can do basically separating out little chunks of functionality that don't make sense as a superclass, and do it in a very elegant way where the compile time can trap a lot of mistakes for you. And also, Moose introduces a full meta protocol, so you can introspect what attributes and what methods a class has, check what the reader is for an attribute. So even if you needed to call it something else for whatever reason, code that uses the meta protocol to figure out what to call will still get it right, and he's going to be robust across interface changes. And roles compose section, because role application, it's a well understood thing. The small talk guys, the Yockel guys did a lot of research into this. So you can do safe role composition, whereas mixings just don't. The old Perl 5 style import-based mixings and moving modules and stuff, they don't handle this at all. Once you get 3 or 4 of them, you're going to get a clash and it's going to fuck your code up. And also, for people who are whinging about unrolling out underscore, method signatures is now on CPAN. Now, the synopsis in it says this is alpha software that depends on more alpha software. It would be more accurate now to say it's beta software that depends on more beta software. Give it another 3 months and it will be basically stable. And that gives you a method keyword. It gives you nice method declaration syntax. Declare your arguments, you never even need to see out underscore, unless you're producing a tiny lambda. In which case, not having to make your arguments is often easier. I mean, things like Paul Graham's art, trumpets, not having to make arguments in lambdas as a feature. It's like, yeah, well done. You've reinvented what Perl did 20 years ago. In fact, you reinvented what the original bombshell did. Wow, yeah, exciting. No. Anyway, people often say that Perl 5 isn't low enough because objects are different to arrays and hashes aren't objects and so on. Well, if you learn Ruby's autobots, yes, they fucking are. So you can do the Ruby or Python style comprehensions across lists, auto-curry subroutines, create junctions like any and all in order to match against sets. So I mean, really, Perl 5 and Moose these days, it is Ruby but with an object model that really has real power. So next thing, Perl 5 is expressive. You can write very compact code in Perl 5, but the important thing is the modern Perl 5 tools let you write expressive code without producing line blocks. So, for example, IRO, this is a fantastic tool for quick scripts. It uses operator overloading and various trickery to make it very easy to write rich I/O code, and you don't have to worry about error handling because it's only a quick script, and you know IRO will die if it encounters any problem and avoid the script. And then there's email stuff that makes it trivial to send emails. So, you've got a nice fluid interface, just go set your values, count send, and it goes away and does it. And the other thing about Perl 5 is it's extremely testable. I mean, TAP very much is the gold standard for test processing out. So many things support it. I mean, Apache uses it for stuff. A lot of the cruise control type tools support TAP input. And a bunch of the IETF people are now talking to the TAP core team with a view to turning it into an RFC and an official internet standard. So there's got to be something right about it. And you get modules like test more, which make it trivial to write quick test scripts for unit tests or whatever. So test more is your standard tool for testing libraries. And then there's test most, which provides you a bunch of extra stuff by default. And it's very useful for application testing. If you're doing a rapidly developed application, you don't want to keep adjusting test numbers and faffing about. So you say defer plan, which makes your test fail unless you call done at the end. And you say die, which means the first test that fails, the test script fails out. Because most of the rest of your tests are going to fail now anyway. And what you want to do is fix that bug and check it's fixed by the fact that the test gets a bit further before it falls over. And with tools like DataFunk, which is sort of a more advanced scale of defer, you can create a deferred object with certain methods patched. So you can create a mock object with literally just that much syntax. You just say mock name of class and pass key value pairs of the method you want the mock to answer to. So it's trivial to do really serious unit testing of code. The other thing is Perl 5 is malleable. Perl 5 has the sort of same list philosophy of building the language up towards your program, rather than decomposing decomposing your program down towards the language. So double declare is a module that powers method signatures. Method signatures itself, all of the parsing and semantics are implemented in Perl 5. Double declare is a very small piece of C code that hooks into the compiler to enable that. And subcode that I showed you earlier, again, it's implemented in Perl 5. And the Moose type system is getting richer and richer. We now have structured types. So you can say this is an array ref of a type hash that must have these keys of these types. And then we're planning to use the structured dictionary and tuple types to provide full positional and named parameter signatures for method calls. And also there's object declare, which is a great example of embedding the domain-specific languages in Perl. There's GIFTDDI, which is another ORM. Its column declaration syntax is like that. And I mean, that's so clear. And object declare just does a few tricks in the Perl code to make is and are effectively operators temporarily. It works perfectly. So, given that nobody seems to be paying attention to this stuff, myself and a few other people from the sort of modern Perl community have formed a non-profit called enlightenperl.org. And basically our aim is to get the word out. Because Perl 5, Perl 5v10 and all of these tools, Perl 5 is already awesome. It is the equal of pretty much any dynamic language out there. I'm quite confident going to conferences and saying the choice between Perl 5 and Python is a matter of taste. It's a matter of which language fits your head better, and they're both brilliant, and they're both usable for huge projects, and yet lots of people are looking at adopting Python, everybody's convinced Perl 5 is going away. It's insane. And we need to fix this. So the reason that this isn't part of the Perl Foundation is the Perl Foundation has to worry about Perl 6 and it has to worry about funding grants for the whole sort of wider community and all the people using different stuff. The Enlightened Perl organisation, we're very much about new way of seeing Perl 5, new Perl enlightenment, and specifically promoting that and getting the word out there and making it more accessible for people to move across to. So hopefully in a couple of years, I'll be giving this talk to people and several people will be saying, hey, I trained in Perl and now I'm making $10,000 more a year and I'm really loving it. So we're going to be helping projects improve their websites, sponsor tutorials to be written, sponsor people to build more screencasts so that we can get the, hey, wow, in 5 minutes of staring at a guy and looking at a screen. I'm sorry, I really don't like screencasts, but a lot of people seem to love them, so it's important to have them. And we're going to make a lot of effort to make sure CPAN is already the best way of installing extension modules for any language I've used, but we want to make it even better. We want to make sure that every module that's part of the sort of enlightened Perl generation of libraries is trivial to install. It installs first time and no problems on every system under the sun. We want to make these libraries more accessible. We want to sponsor people to add features that are really primarily there to make it easier for newbies to get started. Because the problem is, your expert programmers are never going to write that sort of feature to scratch an itch because they don't have the itch, because they don't need that. But these sort of simpler, interfaces with training wheels are really important for getting people in the door. I mean, so see what PHP did. PHP is training wheels without the fucking bike. And also, there are lots of niggles, little things with using modules that all of us are used to. We just work around them without thinking about it. But they're really confusing for people who are trying to get beyond that newbie level to sort of intermediate. So we're going to try and find what those are and get those fixed as well. And we're also going to try and push people to put the word out, push people to blog. We're probably going to run a blogging Iron Man contest, where basically you post a new entry every week or you're out with some interesting swag and prizes for the people who stay in the longest. And we're going to look at getting white papers out there to speak to corporates. And we're also going to get all of these companies using Perl quietly in their back office applications. There's hordes of them. This is one of the problems. Startups pick Ruby, startups pick Python. There's huge numbers of companies With Perl 5 development, it's just chugging along, building stuff that their business relies on. I mean, the company that Django came out of, right? Do any of you guys know that all of their back office applications are actually written in Perl 5? Anybody already know that? No, right. Why the fuck don't people know this? I've sat down at Oscar at a table with both teams. So Django was built to be oriented towards content publishing, which is why it's such a good framework for that stuff. And then they wrote a framework that shares a lot of ideas with Catalyst in Perl 5 to write the back office stuff. Because for total flexibility and being able to bolt in whatever you need, they found that Perl 5 was a better solution. And I think that's fascinating. I think it's great that you've got these two teams collaborating, both using the language and the libraries that make sense for the job. And so we want to get people to start talking about these success stories and actually getting the word out there. So if any of you guys know people using Perl 5 at work, now that company's got no public-facing stuff, get them to give me a shout. I'll quite happily get somebody to speak to their management, see if we can get the word out. Because the other thing is, if companies have got a bigger presence in the community, it's easier for them to hire top talent. Because most of us who are involved in this movement want to work for somewhere that cares about CPAN and about the community. Which is why we're offering individual and corporate paid memberships where the funds go towards the aims that we're looking at. And so we're starting to put together some working groups. So if anybody's interested in this, even if just to sort of sit around and heckle, the mailing lists are going to be EPO-something lists on the Shadow Catalyst server, starting off with a marketing one. And so you look at all this amazing stuff that's been done. Perl 5 is very much alive, and it's very much a tool that you should seriously consider if you've got a new project to do. And if you're looking at an existing Perl 5 code base, rather than scrapping it and switching to Java or to Python or whatever, at least when you're considering what to switch to, consider switching to 21st century bloody Perl. And actually going for that, because it may turn out that that's a much easier thing to do. And it is going to provide a much better return on investment. There's only one last thing to say, which is one of the reasons I've been going on and doing this is because the Perl 5 community has a lot of really smart, really talented people doing cool things, and we really love working together. And the last thing we want is for Perl 5 to disappear and this community to fragment and go away. So the overall aim, in keeping with the title, for those of you who got the pun. So, thank you very much for listening.